We are here today at the Emmaus church and cemetery. Now, this would be considered more of a graveyard than a cemetery, but it is attached to a church. Now, this is the old Emmaus Primitive Baptist Church, and it's been here a long time. I'm not sure when this was established, but I'm going to say the late 1800s is when it was established. And the building's been here a long time. Now, it's all locked up, of course, to keep vandals and one thing and another out of it. But we were up here a couple of months ago, and you could actually see through one of the shutters over here. I'm not sure of the history behind the church, to be honest with you. I just know it's been here as long as I can remember. But you can look inside here, and it's here again. There's no light inside the church. I don't know whether this camera is picking it up or what. I'm trying this head attachment camera deal today, and I've been wrestling with it all morning. But there's holes in the floor for the deacons. The deacons sat in one part of the church, and the ladies and congregation sat in other parts of the church. But they got holes in the floor for them to spit their tobacco out of. A lot of people chewed tobacco, dip snuff. I know my grandmother Davis, Peterson Davis, she dipped snuff, and my great-grandma Davis, she was a Johnson Davis. She dipped snuff. So it's a tradition that's not that old, but here again, you don't see too many people dipping snuff anymore. And you can look at them old log that this church is sitting on. They've been there a long time. They got them piers going across there, and then the church building sitting on top of it. And it's starting to wear out and get in disrepair. And I don't know who's responsible for the building itself, but it would be nice if it was cleaned up and they opened it every once in a while for people to be able to go in. Now, in this cemetery, I do have a couple of relatives that are buried here, direct ancestors. One's direct and the other was his second wife. But there's a good story behind the second wife. Now, Dave Rowe is my great grandfather on my grandmother Davidson's side of the family. Her mama was a Rowe, and this is David Rowe. He was born in November of 1824 and died in November of 1902, 1824 to 1902. Now, David Rowe was born in Georgia. We're in Georgia, by the way, right outside of St. George. But he was born up here in Georgia and lived most of his life up here. He did go to Florida for a while in his youth. But his first wife, my direct ancestor, was Jane Howard Rowe, and she died in 1881. Now, she's buried over in Jones Cemetery with their son, Styles Americus Rowe, and his wife. And we may stop by there on the way. Jones Cemetery is actually on the way back home. But David Rowe was the first, when they split up the counties up here and made, this is Charlton County, and there was Appleton County. And anyway, when they split them up and started the new county, my grandpa David was actually the first clerk of the circuit court. Now, he owned a general store, what I assume was a general store, in Blackshear, Georgia. The census says he had property worth, I think it was $2,400, and personal assets worth about $500. Now, I know that don't sound like a lot, but if you go back to the 1850s, 1860s, you were doing pretty good if you had that kind of money. So anyway, after a while, they left up there and they come back down here, and they had a farm right outside of St. George here, and then his wife passed away, and probably about 10 years later, I'm going to say, he married Bathsheba. Now, Bathsheba was a Hodges. Well, actually, she was Bathsheba. Her maiden name was Heath. Then she married a Hodges. And then she married my great-grandfather, David Rowe. Now, she was born in 1845. So Grandpa David was about 20 years older than her. She died in 1931. Now, she was half Native American, or indigenous American is actually what you'd call them, because anybody born in this country is a Native American. I'm a Native American, and any of the rest of y'all that were born in this country are Native Americans. But she was indigenous, or her ancestors were indigenous to this country anyway. And I don't think my grandmother actually knew about Jane Howard, because she always said that her grandma, talking about her grandma Bathsheba, was an Indian. And so when I was growing up, I always took it that it was the grandma Jane Howard that was Indian. And I looked and looked and looked, and I never found anything that indicated otherwise. Then I found out that it was his second wife. Now, you see, my grandmother wouldn't have known her natural grandmother because she was born after she died. So she wouldn't have known Jane Howard. She only knew Bathsheba. But she always talked about she had a teepee in the backyard. Now, this would have been after, of course, David Rowe died. She went to live with her son. In fact, the only son that her and David had. She lived with them. But she didn't live in the house with them. She had a teepee, believe it or not, out in the backyard. And that was the one thing that my grandmother remembered about who she called her grandma, because it was the only one she knew, or whatever. So we grew up thinking that we had a great-grandma that was half Creek Indian, and turned out it was just a step-grandma. My grandma and grandpa, they used to go up to the Cherokee, North Carolina a lot. And she even had Chief Jarrett Blythe up there. She had told the story to him before we found out the actual truth of the matter. And he was going to get her accepted into the tribe and get them rights, or my grandmother rights, as being a quarter Native American. But she would have had to have moved up on the reservation for a little while up there or whatever, and my grandma didn't like the woods much. She grew up in the woods, and so pretty much whatever Miss Eva said, my grandpa done. So they never went through with it, which is a good thing, because it would have been a bad thing to have taken advantage of something that wasn't earned. Now, here's some of the Hodges that Bathsheba had married into. I'm not sure which one of these was her first husband. Apparently he had passed away. I could probably sit here and figure it out just by dates alone which was her first husband. But anyway, that's pretty much, it's a small cemetery. There's some Connors that are buried here. Quite a few infants are buried here. Nothing real recent. Here's the only thing I see even close to being a recent burial. And that would be Olivia Bell Prophet. Well, it is very recent. April of 22. Very pretty young lady. Looking at the picture there on the stone. I don't know whether y'all can see that. The way this camera works is the only way I can tell what I'm filming is by using my phone, and it uses a Wi-Fi connection, and out here in the woods, I don't get much internet service out here, and it didn't want to connect, so I'm kind of playing this by ear and hoping that it's working. Parkers, some Thomases are buried out here. Here's some reasonably new graves, the Sykeses. Quite a few Sykeses. This is their little corner out here. It's Powell and Wilson. Of course, that would have been a maiden name. Looks like she married a Sykes. Here's some older stones. I know at least two of them are infants. Now this is the Rowe family. And that's 1868 to 1924. And that's in 1868 to 1902. So neither of those are infants. They at least got up into their 40s. And this is Nettie Rowe, 1897 to 1899. So that would be an infant, and I assume from this couple buried beside him. Now, the Rowes were a big family up here in this part of the country. In fact, there was a feud between the Rowes family and the Wingate family. Now, I have Wingate kin people, and two of the Rowe brothers out near where the power plant is near Hector Drive on Jacksonville's north side. There's a road out there called Island Drive now. It was just a road back down in the woods at the time. But a bunch of the Wingates were riding down the road, and two Rowe brothers shot him up like a Bonnie and Clyde deal. They just flat murdered. I think there was 5 people in the car, and they murdered all the adults. They let the one boy go, Leonard Wingate. Now, Leonard Wingate was a cousin of mine, or a cousin of my grandfather, actually, and he's my cousin several times removed. But anyway, they let him go, which was actually their downfall, because when he got back and, of course, told the story, they Rowes were arrested, went to trial. Now, Leonard was too scared of the Rowes to testify in court. In fact, he even said in court that he didn't know who it was that murdered everybody, but it sure wasn't them Rowe boys. Well, the judge, I guess being a smart man, said, well, why would he say that? You know, it wasn't the Rowe boys if the Rowe boys wasn't implicated in some kind of way. Anyway, the Rowes ended up, I think they ended up getting time in prison. I know they weren't put to death. I did read an article, but it just pertained to an appeal that the Rowe brothers had put in to be released for actually the testimony of Leonard Wingate, that it wasn't them. But the judge, like I say, he kind of seen through what was going on and upheld the sentence. Of course, that has nothing to do with this cemetery whatsoever. It's just a story I threw in there just for the heck of it because I seen the name Rowe. Andrew J. Crawford. Got a obelisk from the Woodsman of the World. Seems like if you belong to that fraternity, you either got a obelisk or a tree trunk. This would be infant of W. I'm not sure what that is. I would have to do a rubbing on that. It looks like W-I-L-A, so Willa something. Can't make out any dates. Just a concrete marker. This is a rather an older Frances, wife of W.P. Davis, September 5, 1877 to December 27th, 1921. Just kind of a unusual marker. Another one over there says Jack Sellers. It's a small obelisk, I guess you would call that, but these are all some of the older graves that are here. Another Davis buried over there, but here again there was a lot of Davises up here along the St. Mary's River. Like I say, as best of my knowledge, none of them were any kin to me. So, with that being said, the view of the Emmaus Church. I love that old building. I love that old building. But anyway, there's great-grandpa David and Bathsheba. They're remembered, so they live on. So with that, we're going to call it a day on this one. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. Make a comment if you'd like. God bless you, and y'all have a great day now.